So good day everyone, I am Chrisly Luna Tenorio and the topic that we are going to discuss today is all about discrimination. So first, let's define discrimination. So, discrimination refers to the unfair or unequal treatment of individuals or group based on certain characteristics or attributes such as race, gender, age, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, or socioeconomic status. And it involves the denial of equal rights, opportunities, or privileges to individuals or group based on this characteristic leading to disadvantage or harm. So discrimination can take various forms including direct discrimination, and it occurs when someone is treated less favorably than others based on their protected characteristic or attributes. And it involves explicitly singling out an individual or group and subjecting them to unfair treatment. So denying them equal opportunities, rights, or benefits. So indirect discrimination can manifest in various contexts such as employment, education, housing, public services, or access to goods and services. Here are a few examples of direct discrimination. Number one is employment. It is refusing to hire a qualified candidate based on their race, gender, age, religion, or disability. For instance, rejecting a female applicant for a job position because of a perception that women are less capable in that field. Number two is education. It is the denying admission or scholarship to a student based on their ethnicity, religion, or disability. For example, a school rejecting a student with a disability solely because of their condition. Number three is housing. It is refusing to rent or sell a property to someone due to their sexual orientation or marital status. This could involve a landlord refusing to let an apartment to a same-sex couple. Number four is public services. It is providing an equal treatment or access to services based on a person's nationality or language proficiency. For instance, a government office denying services to individuals who are not fluent in the official language. Number five is goods and services. It is denying someone access to a public place or establishment based on their race or religion. For example, a restaurant refusing to serve customers from a specific ethnic background. And it is important to note that in some cases, direct discrimination may be lawful if it falls under specific exemption or exception defined by legislation. However, these exceptions are usually limited and are meant to balance competing rights or interests in specific circumstances. So, direct discrimination is widely condemned as it perpetuates inequality, violates human rights, and undermines the principle of fairness and equal treatment for all individuals. So many countries have enacted laws and regulations to combat direct discrimination and promote equality and non-discrimination in various spheres of life. So next is indirect discrimination. It occurs when a policy, rule, practice, or criterion that applies to everyone puts certain individuals or groups at a disadvantage based on their protected characteristic, even though the policy may appear neutral or non-discriminatory on the surface. While the policy itself may not explicitly target a specific group, it has an unjustified adverse impact on them. So here are some characteristics of indirect discrimination. Number one is neutral policy. It is the policy or practice in question is seemingly neutral and applies to everyone equally. However, it has a disproportionate negative impact on individuals or group with a particular protected characteristic. So number 2 is a disadvantageous effect. So the policy places individuals or group with a specific protected characteristic at a disadvantage compared to others who do not share the characteristic. So disadvantages may manifest in terms of access to opportunities, services, benefits, or outcomes. So number 3 is lack of justification. It is the policy or practice cannot be objectively justified as legitimate requirement for the job, task, or situation. There should be no reasonable or necessary connection between the policy and the desired outcome. So number 4 is indirect intention. So here in indirect discrimination does not require a direct intention to discriminate. It can occur even if the organization or individual implementing the policy did not have the explicit intent to discriminate. So example of indirect discrimination include number 1 is the language requirement. So requiring fluency in a specific language for a job does not necessitate it, thereby excluding individuals who are not native speaker and disproportionately impacting certain ethnic groups. So number 2 is the height requirement. Setting a minimum height requirement for a job position that is not relevant to tasks or responsibilities involved, which may disproportionately affect women or certain ethnic groups. So number 3 is the work hours. It is implementing rigid work hours that do not accommodate religious practices, disadvantaging employees who need flexibility for their religious and observances. So number 4 is the dress code policies. It is implementing dress code policies that prohibit certain religious or cultural attire and indirectly impacting individuals who observe specific religious or cultural practices. And indirect discrimination is often considered unjust and is prohibited by laws and regulation in many countries. It is essential for organizations and individuals to regularly review their policies and practices to ensure they do not inadvertently discriminate against individuals or groups based on protected characteristics. So next, we have the systemic discrimination, also known as institutional or structural discrimination, and it refers to patterns of discrimination that are embedded within the societal institution, system, policies, or practices, and it extends beyond the action of individuals and encompasses broader social, economic, and political structure that perpetuate inequality and disadvantage certain group over time. So here are some key features of systemic discrimination. Number one here is the embedded in institutions. So systemic discrimination is deeply ingrained within the various institutions, including but not limited to education, employment, healthcare, criminal justice, housing, and government. And it is not limited to the action of a specific individual, but is reflected in the policies, practices, and culture of this institution. So the next is the reproduces inequality. So here, systemic discrimination perpetuates existing social inequalities and disadvantages certain groups based on their protected characteristics, such as race, gender, ethnicity, religion, disability, or socioeconomic status. It often results in persistent disparities in access to resources, opportunities, and outcomes. So next is the implicit bias. Systemic discrimination can be driven by implicit biases and unconscious prejudices that influence decision-making processes within an institution. These biases can lead to discriminatory outcomes even without explicit intent. So number 4 is the historical and interconnected. So here, it is often rooted in historical and interconnected factors such as colonialism, slavery, segregation, and cultural biases. It can have long-lasting effects that persist across generation. Example of discrimination, systemic discrimination include educational disparities. It is unequal access to quality education, resources, and opportunities for certain racial or socioeconomic groups, leading to persistent achievement gaps and limited upward mobility. So next is the employment discrimination. It is the practicing within the workplace that result in unequal opportunities for career, advancement, wage gaps, and occupational segregation based on gender, race, or other protected characteristic. So next is the criminal justice system. Disproportionate arrest, conviction, and harsher sentencing for certain racial or ethnic groups, indicating systemic biases within the criminal justice system. So next is the housing discrimination. It is the unequal access to affordable housing, discriminatory lending practices, and residential segregation that disproportionately impact marginalized communities. And addressing systemic discrimination requires comprehensive effort that go beyond individual level action, and it involves critically examining and challenging the policies, practices, and the structure that perpetuate inequality, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, implementing anti-discrimination laws and regulation, advocating for policy changes, and fostering inclusive practices are essential steps toward combating system discrimination and promoting more equitable society. So next is the harassment discrimination. It refers to the mistreatment or offensive behavior directed at an individual or group based on their protected characteristics or attributes, and it involves the creation of hostile, intimidating, or offensive environment which is undermine a person's dignity and interferes with their ability to work, learn, or participate in other activities. So here are some key characteristics of harassment discrimination. Number 1 is the unwanted conduct. It is the harassment involves unwanted behavior, whether it is verbal, non-verbal, written, or physical. It can include comment, slurs, joke, gesture, images, threat, or any other form of offensive conduct. So number 2 is the based on protected characteristic. Harassment is typically based on a person's protected characteristic such as their race, gender, age, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, attributes protected by law, and it may target an individual directly or create a hostile environment for a particular group. So next is the hostile environment. Harassment creates an intimidating, hostile, degrading, or offensive environment that interferes with the person's ability to perform their job, receive an education, or engage in social activities. It can involve persistent or severe mistreatment that causes emotional distress or detrimentally affect an individual's well-being. So number 4 is the not limited to direct interaction. Harassment can occur through direct interaction between individuals, but it can also be facilitated through technology, social media, or other forms of communication. Number 1 is the cyberbullying. An online harassment are example of harassment discrimination that takes place in digital spaces. So we have the examples of harassment discrimination include sexual harassment. It is unwanted sexual advances, comments, gesture, or other form of verbal or physical conduct or a sexual nature that create hostile or uncomfortable environment for the targeted person. This can occur in workplace, educational institution, or public spaces. So next is the racial or ethnic harassment. It is offensive comments, racial slurs, derogatory gestures, or other form of mistreatment based on person, race, or ethnicity, leading to a hostile environment and discrimination. So next is the religious harassment. It is a verbal or physical attacks, derogatory comments, or exclusionary practices targeted at individuals or group based on their religious belief or practices, causing distress or hindrance in their daily lives. So number 4 is the bullying and cyberbullying. So that's all for discrimination. Thank you for watching.